So how are those rabbit ears working? I'm Trelly Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning. Welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, the royal baby makes his first appearance and gets a name, Prince George of Cambridge. The future King of England spent the week sleeping a lot. Former Congressman and New York mayoral candidate Anthony Weiner admitted that he had engaged in sexting even after he was forced to resign from Congress for sending raunchy texts to young women. He sent the latest sexy texts under the fake name Carlos Danger. Protesters return to the state capitol and get arrested for violating rules requiring permits. The Pope draws massive crowds in Brazil. A tragic high-speed train crash in Spain kills dozens. But around here, it was all Ryan Braun all the time. The hammer fell fast, and it fell hard. The Brewers star was suspended for the remainder of the season for his use of performance-enhancing drugs. Drugs that Braun had repeatedly and adamantly denied using. You might remember this from February 2012 after he beat a positive drug test on a technicality.
I will continue to take the high road because that's who I am, and that's the way that I've lived my life. We won because the truth is on my side.
Yeah, well, no. This week, Braun accepted the suspension, issued a statement saying that, as I have acknowledged in the past, I am not perfect. He said in the statement, I realize now that I have made some mistakes. I am willing to accept the consequences of those actions. I wish to apologize to anyone I may have disappointed. All of the baseball fans, especially those in Milwaukee, the great Brewers organization, and my teammates, I'm glad to have this matter behind me once and for all, and I cannot wait to get back to the game I love. But that weak non-apology didn't put it behind him at all. Reaction was harsh and widespread. He was labeled a cheat, a liar, and his career seems likely to be haunted by the scandal. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, the president of the Wisconsin Policy Research Institute, Mike Nichols, political strategist Linda Bruin, and media trackers Brian Sickman. We'll start with you, Mike. I mean, who is this guy now? I mean, he's a liar? Is he a cheat? Is he a fraud? Well, what are we supposed to think of the superstar?
Yeah, all of the above. The video that you showed from the spring training conference, press conference, was absolutely damning, and that's what I always remember. You know, I remember watching that and thinking, you know, in my head, this doesn't make sense. I think this guy's a cheat, but in my heart, I believed him. I wanted to believe him, and I think a lot of other people felt the same way. We wanted to believe this guy, and we just feel that he has betrayed us.
You know, I'm really struck by how visceral and how negative the reaction is. In part, it was because he was so adamant in his declarations of innocence, but also that non-apology apology. You know, the apologizing for people he may have offended and putting it behind him, and, you know, mistakes were made. I really get the sense that Ryan Braun still does not understand the damage that he's done to his team, to baseball, and to himself. Yeah,
I totally agree, and in Milwaukee in particular, because, you know, we were all behind him. We wanted to believe he was innocent. Everybody rejoiced when he beat those charges. Now we feel basically like fools because he took us for the ride.
We were suckers.
Yeah, and so you know, this is like Lance Armstrong at the Milwaukee level, but actually it's national as well. And I think that between Lance Armstrong and him, that the sport's going to be changed.
Okay, Brian Sickman, now that Lance Armstrong analogy is one that keeps coming to my mind because, you know, it's one thing to juice, I'm not defending it, it's one thing to do, it's another thing to lie about it, and it's another thing then to smear other people, as he did with Dino Lorenzo Jr., who was the collector, and that is, I think, going to be very, very tough for Ryan Braun to come back from.
Ryan Braun had a chance to try to make some things right. He could have come out with a hard-hitting apology and accepted full responsibility for it. He could have apologized to those that he smeared in the process. He did not do that, and I think that's what really causes sports fans, Milwaukee Brewers fans, to be frustrated. I mean, here's a guy you look up to. He had a chance. Once it came out that he did something wrong, he could have tried to make it right, and he did none of that.
Okay, but we have seen, you know, Michael, you and I have been around for a long time. We have seen how short the memories of fans are, how easy they are to forgive. Is he going to be able to make a comeback here?
If he really cleans up his act and he makes a serious public apology. Well, you know, you and I were at the game last Sunday, and he hit that double. I mean, the stadium went berserk. Yeah. I don't anticipate that happening next season. But, you know, at the same time, you have to give some kudos, because we were kind of like down on the commissioner, Major League Baseball, because we thought he was, you know, innocent, or they were picking on him. Now, they stand above reproach now, as well as the Brewers organization.
Is it too cynical for me, Mike, to say that all he really needs to do is to bat 300 and hit a lot of home runs, and the fans are going to forgive him?
I think it is too cynical, and I wonder if he's capable of doing that without the Peds. But the reality is the Brewers are a small market team. They only have room for one big contract. It's Ryan Braun. I think he has screwed them over for the next, as long as his contract lasts. They are indebted to him to the tune of over $100 million. They have to give him that money.
Can they cut him loose?
They apparently cannot cut him loose unless they can find a way to sue him for fraud.
Well, I think legally in the contract there's some outs. The problem is every time baseball's tried to do it, it's never succeeded. I do think that there's a possibility that they could do a mutual buyout, but that is a negotiation, and that's going to cost them money too.
Yeah, look, this is a small market team. Maybe the New York Yankees could do this, but if they did anything even remotely like this, they would probably cripple the franchise for a generation in terms of doing that. So I guess the question is, I mean, what does he have to do beyond an apology? I mean, and then the apologies ought to be very good. Well, let me put this in context. On Friday, Aaron Rodgers broke seriously bad on Ryan Braun. In fact, a lot of people were really shocked about it. I mean, they're partners, they're friends. Rodgers had gone to the wall for him, and he said, look, he lied to him right to his face. So it's not just to the general public. Apparently, he was doing this in private as well.
He's certainly hurt his friends. What he needs to do is he needs to come out and he needs to say, look, Ryan Braun, I have gotten things right in my life. And I think it would be helpful if he did some public outreach, charity work, something like that, that would show that deep down inside he has made a transition as to who he is in baseball.
Okay, what has your glass half full and what has your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
Well, it's half full if you don't see me right now because of this dispute between WTMJ and Time Warner. It's half full, though, because there's some alternatives. But you probably won't know about the alternatives if you're not seeing me right now because you don't know that we're on anyway.
Mike Nichols.
The NPS glass is half full. They've been under the constraints of a union contract for a long time. It expired in the end of June. It's a huge opportunity for the district to reform itself. But that glass is largely empty as well, because I'm told that Greg Thornton is the wrong man to lead that district.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half full because a Florida family was unharmed after their SUV turned over and bystanders rescued them. But it's half empty because one of the rescuers was George Zimmerman, and the family canceled plans to publicly thank him because they became afraid of being tied to him.
Brian Stickman.
Well, my glass is half empty today because Iron County citizens are now facing the problem of an anti-mine protest camp violating environmental regulations. But their glass can be half full because their county board has taken steps to hold those protesters accountable and begin to pass a resolution authorizing criminal and civil charges against those involved.
Well, my glass is half empty because the Capitol chaos is back. It's half full because we finally have a Capitol Police chief who is going to arrest the lawbreakers instead of letting them order pizzas. Capitol Police arrest protesters in the Capitol building. What took them so long? We'll talk about that when Sunday Insight continues. Because we just can't have enough Capitol chaos. Familiar scenes from Madison as protesters gather in the Capitol again, but this time there's a twist. Capitol Police are actually enforcing the law, arresting members of the so-called Solidarity Singers who've gathered in the Capitol Rotunda for 2.5 years to protest the passage of collective bargaining reform and air other grievances. A federal judge struck down some of the new rules requiring permits, but said the Walker administration could still require groups of more than 20 protesters to have permits. For days, activists taunted police by holding much larger protests, ignoring, even laughing at the cops who repeatedly warned them they faced arrest because they didn't have permits. Then last Wednesday, arrests began, and they continued the next day and on Friday. One Democrat senator compared the scene to Tiananmen Square. Brian Sigma, a bit much?
I do think it's a bit much. And I think what we're seeing here, these Capitol protesters, it's not that they're looking for free speech. That's the mantra they're trying to go out and talk about. But this is, these are 1960s radical hangovers that are trying to figure out what to do with their lives still. And all they can do is go protest at the state capitol and mock police officers, mock law enforcement officers that are there to protect the public and keep the Capitol secure. I think it's great that they're getting arrested. I mean, it's about time.
Okay, Michael Holt.
Well, I have mixed emotions about this because I'm a child of the 60s and 70s and protests. I don't know exactly what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, you're not going to be seeing Act 10. At the same time, the ways to get around this, of course, by getting permits. And you also have to acknowledge that in many instances, you know, getting arrested is a badge of courage.
Yeah.
I mean, you can actually say that I was a part of this.
Not in Dane County, where if you get a Dane County liberal judge, nothing's going to happen to you. So it's not that brave. But you raise an interesting point. What exactly are they protesting against? It's protest for the sake of protest, political theater for the sake of political theater, Mike Nichols.
You know, you need a license in most municipalities in this state to have a block party, let alone to have a carnival. I went on the state website this morning, and you need a license or a permit to sell minnows, to grow Christmas trees. I mean, come on. Apply for a permit. The Walker administration says they don't have a problem with them getting a permit.
Yeah, right.
I guess they're the only people in the world who don't need one. That's what they think.
They wanted to get arrested.
Right. Of course.
And Michael's right. This gives them the little badge of honor. But he's also right that at this point, these protests have absolutely no meaning. And if they really want to change the state law, then you elect more Democrats back into office and reverse some of this. And so to me, it's wasted energy and wasted effort unless your whole goal is just to get on TV or to be able to tell your kids you were arrested.
All right, but obviously the goal is to stir up the Capitol chaos. And let me ask you this question, because I know that the folks in the Walker administration felt that the more chaos, the worse it was for the Walker administration, because independent voters would often blame Walker for the chaos. Now, I'm not sure that that's still the case, but politically, who does benefit? I mean, these folks do have a strategy, and they figure if they can gin up, the 2011 fervor again, maybe they can create the sense that things are out of control and damage Walker going into the election next year.
Well, first of all, they don't have enough people to do that. It's not the same size and scale that actually attracted national attention. And the second thing is, these people forget that TV cameras show what's going on inside Madison, outside Madison. So while their friends and neighbors maybe are cheering them on because Madison's surrounded by reality, it's this island of radicalism, the rest of Wisconsin's not going to buy into that.
Okay, Mike.
I happened to be in the Capitol this week over noon hour. I think all sane people should go in there and see what they're doing, and I think it would not benefit them if people could see firsthand what it's like in the Capitol when they're protesting.
I agree with you, and I think there was also a turn in that whole debate when people began to get a little sick of the drum circles and the vuvuzelas and everything. And in the picture that was in the Journal Sentinel on Friday, of one of the blue-fisted unionistas, taunting police officers, not exactly the political winning strategy. Now, you may not want to hear it, but we're going to tell you anyway. Let's dish out some unsolicited advice, Michael Holt.
Well, mine is for Aaron Rodgers, who said last year that he would give away his whole salary if Braun was actually guilty. My advice, never assume, even as a close friend. And I'll take mine in cash.
Okay, Mike Nichols.
My advice is to Major League Baseball teams, in the future, you should make sure there are provisions in all your contracts to be able to avoid them if any player is found to use performance-enhancing drugs.
Linda Bruin.
Well, they probably don't need this advice because they've handled things so well so far, but my advice is for England's most famous brand new parents, Prince William and Kate. Please raise your son like Princess Diana raised hers, with lots of hands-on parenting and away from the media.
Brian Sickman.
Well, Senator Bob Jock, this advice is for you. Now, I know you like to get on television, you like to be having your face all over television and TV, but really, next time, study up in your history. This was no Tiananmen Square that was taking place in Madison. Get serious.
Okay, this is serious. It's for all you guys out there, all of you guys. There's a lesson in this whole Anthony Weiner, Carlos Danger story. Put down the phone. Nobody wants to see a picture of your junk, ever. Okay? Just don't even think of it. Next on Sunday Insight. Is it worth it to fight over this high school mascot? A local school district votes to defy the State Department of Public Instruction and keep its Indian nickname. Mukwonago High School has been the Indian since 1911, but the State Education Department ordered it to drop the Indian logo and nickname by August 15th or face daily fines, $1,000 a day. Well, last week the school board refused, challenging the constitutionality of the order and calling for the repeal of the state law that allows the state DPI to force local districts to change nicknames that are considered stereotypical. Michael Holt, who's right here.
DPI and those who complain. And now the Native Americans I talk to do not find this ingratiating,
Do they find it offensive?
Many of them do. Washington Redskins. I mean, there have been protests for that. Let's flip the script a little bit. Yeah. So what if we called, say, the Washington County Wetbacks? Would that be offensive? Okay, what about the Racine Rednecks? Would that be offensive to people?
Okay, the Notre Dame Irish.
Victim side.
The Irish.
I mean, that's the name of a people. I mean, it's not.
Well, Indians.
Native Americans.
They're Native Americans. But these stereotypical images, particularly, look at Washington, the Redskins, big nose, a whole ball of wax.
The
It fuels stereotypes.
Redskins, I think, is a close. I'll concede that.
Why
to you.
did they have to keep it?
Okay, but we're not talking about the Redskins. We are talking about Indians. This is Mukwonago. Did you notice that's an Indian place name? It's in
So is
Waukesha
Milwaukee.
County, Milwaukee, exactly. So who's right here, Brian Sigmund?
Absolutely, Mukwonago's right. I think they're handling it the right way. They're trying to litigate this out in the courts, and they're going to make sure that this follows its due process. I hope legislators take the matter up. I hope they decide to get rid of this ridiculous law that's out there, because.
But there is a law.
There is a law.
And they are defying the law.
And they are, and they need. Well, I don't know if they're defying the law. They're trying to litigate this out right now. I wouldn't rush to that judgment, but I do think lawmakers should look at changing that law.
Okay, Linda Brown.
Well, the problem here is that there is a law about this, and so DPI has to follow the law as long as the law is in place. On the other hand, the school board has a right to try and challenge that law. So the irony here is, I think most Caucasians don't find the word Indian offensive.
Neither do most Native Americans.
Well,
Reduce it to
that I don't
themselves.
know, and I don't know I haven't heard anything about whether any
There
of
was a
tribes in the area.
survey a few years ago that asked Native American, rank and file Native Americans, were you offended by Redskins? And I think it was only 9%, where 91% didn't have it. I don't know that there's anyone offended by the word Indian at all.
And part of the problem with this law is that to trigger it, all you need is one complaint. And what happened was someone complained to the school board and that DPI, and that started it.
Mike Nichols.
I had a lot of sympathy for Mukwonago up to this point. I think that the DPI process was itself very biased. I agree with the original circuit court judge who said that it was an unfair process. However, at this point, the initial circuit court ruling has been overturned by an appeals court, and the Supreme Court has said, to my understanding, they will not take the case. So until there's a change in the law and the legislature, it is the law, and I think that Mukwonago could say, yes, we're going to change the name. I would say they don't have to act incredibly quickly to enact that change, but it is the law until the legislature acts again.
Yeah, look at the money they're wasting. Everybody's talking about, how education is underfunded. They're willing to go ahead and lose $1,000 a
But
day.
Michael, they are
changing the name costs a lot, too.
$10,000 to
money.
change everything. So I understand
That's
both
what they
sides
said
on
when they
this one.
wanted to make King Drive all the way to Wisconsin. We had all of those store owners and merchants that said, it's going to cost so much money, so we don't want our street name.
Here's part of the problem, though, that if you cannot trust a local school district and a local community to choose its own logo, then what do you choose? Why trust them for anything? I mean, this is the ultimate politically correct, bureaucratic, top-down order. And I'm a little bit torn. I agree with Mike about the law. On the other hand, somebody's got to stand up against the bullies, and so I got to give them a little bit of credit. Okay, is what they said this week the same thing as what you heard? Let's go around the table, Michael Holt.
Well, one of the jurors in the George Zimmerman case said in the press last week that he got away with murder, but she voted to exonerate him anyway. What she really said, what I heard was, I really don't have the principles to stand up to what's right.
Mike Nichols.
In regard to Ryan Braun, Aaron Rodgers said this week that it doesn't feel good to be lied to. I think what he meant is, this guy is dead to me.
Linda Bruin.
Well, last week we learned that Anthony Weiner was still sexting women as late as last summer. So when Anthony Weiner also announced last week that last summer was when he cured his problem, what I heard was a man saying, I just can't stop, and I should not be mayor.
Brian Sigma.
Well, in a much-touted speech on economic policy at a college campus, President Barack Obama this week announced he's going to be focusing on jobs. Well, this president's been president for one term already, and all I heard was the empty rhetoric of a president who prefers posturing to problem solving.
Well, what they said, the union representing all the IRS employees said, we don't want to be pushed into Obamacare. What I heard was this thing is a train wreck, and it should only be imposed on little people, not those of us in government. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
According to news reports, there's some dissension among moderate and progressive Democrats over the future economic policies of that particular party. They just realized there's a lot of poor folks in America who have not benefited from the recovery. The problem is, and one reason why we're actually losers is, if I recall correctly, in 1965, LBJ instituted his war on poverty. The poverty rate then was 40% among black folks. Today it's 42%. Don't expect too much from Democrats.
Mike Nichols.
A new study says that only 5% of Milwaukee area children born in the economic bottom fifth of households will be able to reach the top fifth in their 30s or 40s. They're the unfortunate losers. The winner, Paul Ryan, for pointing out this week that the war on poverty has failed Michael. And we need to restore upward mobility through self-sufficiency that used to be known as the American dream.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my winners are President George H.W. Bush and members of his security detail who shaved their heads to support an agent's son with leukemia. In 1953, the Bushes lost their own little girl to leukemia, and Bush shaving his head was a sweet gesture of support for both children. My loser is the deadbeat dad who has proudly had 22 children with 14 women and never paid child support. Now that he's signed on to doing a reality TV show, maybe Tennessee will get back some of the $7,000 a month taxpayers are paying to support his children.
Brian Sickman.
Well, Wisconsin's own Reince Priebus is my winner. Priebus, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, this week graciously and strongly reaffirmed the Republican Party's commitment to traditional marriage and the sanctity of all human life. Priebus' humility and strength on these issues are an example for all who stand for these principles in the public square. Well, my loser this week is Jason Huberty, a geologist with the Wisconsin Geological Survey. That makes him a state employee. Huberty was arrested not once, but twice Wednesday for his illegal protest antics in the state capitol. Yes, a state worker protesting and getting arrested over his presumable lunch break. The University of Wisconsin system is now investigating him.
Well, my loser, all those fans like me who thought that Ryan Braun was the real deal. My winner, I have to say it, Bud Selig in Major League Baseball. They got their man, and this has to be sweet vindication. So, Bud, this one's for you. Thanks for joining us. Join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.